Welcome to another episode of the MRP Easy Manufacturing Podcast. This episode is about the bullwhip effect. We'll explain what it means for manufacturers, why it happens, and how it can impact your supply chain and profits. The bullwhip effect refers to the phenomenon where seemingly small fluctuations in the supply chain can cause major disruptions, spreading like a ripple throughout the entire chain. The impacts of the bullwhip effect encompass everyone, from retailers to wholesalers, manufacturers, and raw material vendors. The name is derived from an actual bullwhip, where a short wrist action at the handle causes a major arc at the business end of the whip. For businesses of all kinds, that crack at the end of the whip can spell disaster. Even small changes can cause a backlash that's difficult to recover from. Miscommunication is the leading cause of the bullwhip effect. Bullwhip effect disruptions almost always stem from miscommunication, often at the retail level. However, it can start at any point in the supply chain where inventory shortage levels and their causes aren't effectively communicated to the various parties who will be affected by them. Let's look at an example. In the mid-1990s, Volvo discovered it had an excessive inventory of green sedans. The sales and marketing departments, including retailers, ran a special promotion that offered customers desirable discounts on the green cars. It worked, and green autos flew off the lots. Unfortunately, nobody told the manufacturing team this was a temporary price fluctuation. So to meet the perceived demand, they ramped up production of green sedans. This created an even larger overstock of unsold cars, which further increased the carrying costs for excess inventory. To recover, Volvo had to run an even more aggressive discount program to move the new surplus. This shows the effect that expected price fluctuations can have if not communicated properly. Here are 5 more major causes for the bullwhip effect. 1. Demand forecasting errors. It's common for businesses, from the retail level on up, to use historical data as a predictive measure of inventory management based on previous consumer demand. However, any miscalculations here can result in either overstocking or low inventory levels. Without taking into account current demand information, forecast accuracy isn't possible. Here's a real-world example of how relying solely on previous demand can literally take a bite out of your profitability apple. The tech titan Apple releases new products every year. They launched the iPhone 5 in 2012. A high demand was anticipated based on previous historical data. Anticipating this, Apple placed massive orders with its component suppliers, which caused a tsunami of orders in the upstream supply chain. Unfortunately, the consumer demand was lower than forecasted, triggering a classic bullwhip effect. Component manufacturers had invested in machinery, labor, and materials to meet the inflated demand. But they were left holding a huge stock of components that couldn't be used for other products. 2. Order batching. This is a common practice for industries that rely on bulk purchasing, often to get better discounts. In effect, purchases are held off until a certain inventory is reached for restocking. More often than not, this interval varies in response to market demand. When the orders are finally placed, the suppliers may overreact to the greater than expected demand, often by overproducing in anticipation of bigger demands. The mixed demand signals caused by order batching make inventory decision-making pure guesswork. What's more, if the time between batch orders is sufficiently long, suppliers may need to reduce levels by discarding expired items, which can in turn lead to stockouts. Order batching bullwhips are rampant and quite damaging when it comes to food production or pharmaceuticals, both of which often deal with expiry dates. Another possible action the producer or vendor might take is to short orders on other customers, manufacturers in this case, which leads to distrust in the supply chain. 3. Longer than expected lead times. Long lead times already contribute to the potential for a bullwhip effect. It increases the time a business has to respond to any changes in demand. Consumers are fickle, and what was yesterday's hot item could easily become today's obsolete inventory. When companies have limited visibility into real-time demand fluctuations, longer than expected lead times only exacerbate the problem. It can lead to overcompensating orders to maintain stock levels to answer demand. Unfortunately, this misalignment of supply and demand often leads to either stockouts or excess inventory levels that become unmovable once demand stabilizes. 4. Lack of real-time data sharing. When there is a lack of transparent information sharing between different levels of the supply chain, companies are unable to respond effectively to changes in demand. A lack of real-time data sharing can lead to inaccurate demand signals and poor decision-making. The bullwhip effect is often intensified by the inability of supply chain partners to communicate effectively with one another, causing a surge of inefficiencies. For example, if a vendor experiences unexpected downtime and doesn't communicate this in the expected timeline to supply chain partners downstream, panic ensues. The downstream partner may order from a different vendor, leaving the original supplier saddled with excessive inventory that might otherwise have been shipped in time. 5. The ever-present human factor. Human behavior amplifies the bullwhip effect far beyond what supply chain structure alone would create. When a retailer panics and overorders, that irrational behavior ripples all the way up the supply chain. But when a distributor or factory makes the same mistake, it mostly stays at their level. In other words, panic closest to the consumer has the most devastating upstream impact. The first person to react to a forecast demand change, typically the retailer, sets the tone for everyone up the chain. Calm, data-driven decisions prevent the cascading effect. Emotional overreaction amplifies it. The impacts and consequences of the bullwhip effect. The bullwhip effect can have serious business consequences, ignoring which can lead to severe damage to a company's profitability. Let's examine some of the most severe consequences that can befall the entire supply chain, from raw materials and ingredient suppliers to manufacturers, processors, wholesalers, and retailers. Inventory imbalances. One immediate and most noticeable consequence of the bullwhip effect is an inventory imbalance. When mixed signals on demand are conveyed, one of two imbalances will occur, each with different effects and costs. First, the business may end up with excessive stock because the demand signal communicated was larger than what actually happened. Overstocking leads to higher holding and warehousing costs. Often this comes about because higher than normal safety stock is held, taking up additional storage space and requiring more labor for inventory record-keeping and auditing. Second, if the demand forecast is too low and demand is actually higher than expected, stockouts result in missed sales and customer frustration, all up and down the entire supply chain. Vendors who can't fulfill orders to processors and manufacturers may find that they're permanently replaced by another supplier who stepped in to save the day. Inefficient production and distribution. The bullwhip effect also impacts production scheduling. A manufacturer might increase their output if it perceives an uptick in demand. However, if consumer demand is actually lower and has stabilized, they may find that they've overproduced and now need to think of what to do with the excess stock. Because of the market variability, an increase or decrease in demand may be temporary. This makes it difficult for suppliers to adjust shipping and production schedules on the fly to match this fluctuating demand. Inefficiencies like this usually result in wasted resources, unproductive labor use, and missed deadlines. Higher cost of doing business. One of the keys to profitability is keeping operating costs as low as possible without sacrificing quality. But when the bullwhip cracks, things go crazy. Some of the effects are increased inventory holding costs, expedited shipping fees to meet unexpected demand, the expense of correcting over and underproduction, in some cases, additional warehouse space for excess inventory and transportation adds costs that lower the bottom line. While this can happen to just one supply chain partner, more often than not, the issues have a domino effect that ripples throughout the entire supply chain, all the way down to the customer. Every business understands that without customers, it fails. So customer service is a high priority, especially at the retail level. Disruptions in the supply chain lead to delivery delays. Customers may experience longer than normal wait times, or the product they wanted won't be available, and they need to either choose something else or walk away. Remember, not every car buyer longs for a green Volvo sedan. Customer satisfaction in providing the products that they want when they want them is a key to business success. Bullwhip effect real-world examples. The trigger event for the bullwhip effect can come from various developments, including man-made, weather-related, or medical catastrophes. Even a quick flip of the wrist in governmental policies or political conflicts can set off a chain of events that produce a domino effect. One current issue is volatile tariff negotiations. If product prices get too high, consumers will cut back on niceties and focus solely on necessities. The bullwhip handle is already in motion. Unexpected price variations can definitely cause customers to become wary and put retailer purchase orders into limbo. Bullwhip effect in supply chains. Weather can certainly start the bullwhip effect in supply chains, particularly wholesalers and retail-level distributors. In 2009, an unexpected snow and ice storm hit the area where I live. This weather is uncommon for our state and region, and there was suddenly a demand amplification for, of all things, chainsaws. The excessive ice caused large tree limbs to fall and block driveways and streets. The leading home improvement retailer in my town ran out almost overnight at both locations, but almost as quickly, chainsaws by the pallet arrived at both stores. I'm assuming they reached out to other stores and supply chain partners to get the saws back in stock. With a limit of one saw per customer, I saw panicked families give each family member a chainsaw-laden shopping cart. They passed the credit card down to each person as they cleared the checkout station. But within a few days, the ice and snow melted, along with the sales. While the retailer was able to move excess inventory to other stores or back to the wholesaler, this incurred double shipping costs. Small fluctuations in demand due to unexpected weather events and natural disasters in a single area are something that must have a system in place to handle emergency procurement. Bullwhip effect in manufacturing. If forecast accuracy isn't part of operations management on the manufacturing level, overproduction and underproduction can run rampant. Do you recall Y2K and the alleged end-of-the-world hype? I do. Before you knew it, generators were sold everywhere, even in grocery stores around here. Manufacturers stepped up production to meet the forecasted demand. On January 2, 2000, a lot of those generators were returned when nothing of note happened, causing excessive inventory and idle production lines. Panic buying of essentials can lead to overproduction and excessive inventory levels too. Look no further than the COVID-19 pandemic. All of a sudden, keeping copious amounts of toilet paper and hand sanitizer on hand took precedence in consumers' minds. Everyone rushed to stockpile the precious commodity, and manufacturers ramped up production accordingly. When demand finally normalized, manufacturers were left with an oversupply that resulted in financial losses and production inefficiencies. For example, production capacity numbers were skewed, and any extra machines or labor force brought in to handle the higher-than-normal demand were idled. Fortunately, toilet paper doesn't have an expiration date. Industries often affected by the bullwhip effect. The bullwhip effect can affect virtually any industry where a supply chain is involved. However, it's most prevalent or noticeable in certain sectors. Consumer electronics, where demand can fluctuate significantly with product launches and technology cycles. Fashion, where seasonal trends and style changes create demand variability. Pharmaceuticals, where regulatory requirements and distribution complexity amplify variability. Pandemics or world health crises can also contribute to volatility. Food processing, where perishability and seasonal demand create additional demand challenges. Manufacturing components, where long lead times and complex supply networks compound the effects of a supply chain bullwhip. How to reduce the bullwhip effect? It may be difficult, if not impossible, to completely dial out the impact of the bullwhip effect. However, there are ways to keep some of it from happening and, when it does, to mitigate and lessen its effects. Almost all of them require precise demand information and an accurate, unemotional, and measured interpretation of all demand signals. Improve your demand forecasting. One of the most effective strategies is improving your demand forecasting. To be sure, you need to include historical data in the mix, but don't solely rely on it for accuracy. A volatile market could render that data inaccurate in a highly suspect method for production and buying decision-making. Instead, use a data-driven approach, often couched in a software solution that includes business analytics insights, such as those with Microsoft BI integration. Data-driven strategies include historical records, but also add current market trends and real-time data analysis. This helps businesses align their production and manufacturing processes as well as inventory levels to actual demand. The effectiveness of accurate demand forecasting can't be overstated. Enhance communication and collaboration. Keep in mind that the bullwhip effect doesn't exist in a vacuum. It requires open communication among everyone involved to keep the information flow optimal. Businesses should invest in building strong supplier relationships, but also everyone else in the supply chain, like manufacturers and processors, wholesale distributors, and retailers. A healthy supply chain management strategy is vital to meet and overcome supply and demand fluctuations. One collaborative supply chain model is vendor-managed inventory, or VMI. For it to work effectively, communication between stages of the supply chain is crucial. In this strategy, a supplier will monitor and restock a customer's inventory based on the shared data, like sales and stock levels. For retailers and buyers, this means there are fewer stockouts, lower inventory costs, including less safety stock required, and better customer service. For suppliers and vendors, it creates a more predictable demand, allowing for better production planning, stronger customer relationships, and reduced carrying costs. For everyone involved, it could be the best way to achieve a win-win supply chain setup and move toward a just-in-time inventory initiative that prevents both excessive inventory levels and stockouts. Use technology for real-time data sharing. Manual data sharing might have worked back when supply chains were short and the region served was local, but in today's worldwide economy, it won't cut it. Manual systems are too prone to delays and human error. That includes the oft-forgotten trait of emotional valuation. People panic, electronic systems don't. Supply chain management software provides real-time data and visibility that help mitigate the bullwhip effect, particularly for suppliers and manufacturers. Technology, especially in the form of cloud-based platforms and integrated ERP, enterprise resource planning systems, makes sharing information between supply chain partners seamless. This makes more accurate and faster decision-making possible. More advanced software also uses machine learning to improve demand forecast predictions. Workforce management strategies. One way to ensure that production levels align with fluctuating customer demand is to implement effective workforce management strategies. This could include various strategic initiatives to make the workforce more agile. Use a dynamic scheduling system that allows you to scale both up and down based on real-time demand signals. This ensures you have enough workers at all times, but prevents costly inefficiencies and idle labor. A responsive, not reactive, workforce management system enhances your bottom line, particularly in a fluctuating market. Cross-train employees on several jobs and roles in the plant. Often, a demand fluctuation doesn't affect every aspect of your production process. Having trained workers who can be pulled from slower lines or machines to handle areas of increased demand keeps the manufacturing process running optimally. You might find that your employees will appreciate opportunities to enhance their skills. Use technology solutions to enhance all operations. I want to reiterate the importance of choosing an effective software technology for every aspect of your operation. Data sharing and management aren't limited to what is shared with organizations in your supply chains. Effective manufacturing or inventory software enhances operations within your shop or facility as well. This keeps your production and procurement strategies on track, and they will run more smoothly when guided by the real-time data you glean from the software. For small manufacturers, surviving and even avoiding the bullwhip effect is crucial, not just for success, but for survival as well. Small businesses don't always have the unlimited resources and cash flow that larger organizations do. Staying on top of operations is a vital part of maintaining profitability and staying in business. That wraps up this episode of the MRP Easy Manufacturing Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. For more information, go to mrpeasy.com. See you next time.